So let me know when I'm to get started, and I'll be happy to jump in. Or if you
Okay,
want to
so
like wait a couple minutes for some other people to join, that's still fine by me.
I'm trying to start the recording now. Once it's up, we have well, because of time, I think we could just start.
All right, no problem. That's very fine. That's very fine. All right, give me a second. Let me log into Figma and share.
Okay, that's fine. Welcome everyone. Welcome Tayo. Welcome Ajibola. Welcome Father Figma. Do I know who Father Figma is? I think so. Welcome James. Welcome Aliezi. Welcome Victor. All right. So yeah, I say over to you.
So my network has been very, very shitty for like a couple of days. I'm just hoping everything like works perfectly well today. But give me a quick second. I'll be back in like 10, 15 seconds. I need to like make sure my router and everything is properly connected.
Fine. Right. So for the room, you can. I'll be opening up the Q&A session very soon, so you can all post in your questions there. And then when Ice is done with the session, it will take up the question. For anyone that wants to connect, you could also put out your social media handles or links in the chat section.
Right. So we are all set. I'm set. So ignore my plenty tabs. Oh, you're not even seeing my Chrome. That's fine. I already apologizing for my Chrome tabs. I think that was what started hanging my Mac because I think I had almost about 300 Chrome tabs. The Mac just froze.
Oh wow!
It's a very bad habit that I'm trying to learn. I'm in therapy. I'm in therapy. Chrome
Okay,
tab therapy.
all right.
anyways. So I remember when you approached me with the topic, and it was one that I said was very interesting because personally, there are a lot of observations I've made while designing on dark mode. I have this theory that a lot of people tend to, especially beginners and juniors, they tend to just go into design of dark modes. One of the major reasons is because it feels flashy or they feel it's nice, it looks good, and they just rush into it without really knowing what to do, without even doing anything properly, and it comes out nice. And when you tend to like look at the design, you if you have a keen eyes, you get to notice a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of bad designs. So there was this term like a friend of mine and I kind of like made. He said dark mode is the interface to hide bad designs. Because if you really look at it, most times you can really slap off anything on dark mode and oh wow, because it's different, because it's like it's classy, it's unique, it feels very good. So when you approached with that topic, I was like, oh wow, this is something we randomly talk about, people designing some things they do wrongly. There was a time I was purely against designing dark mode for beginners, like do not use dark mode, don't, learn your basics first. Now those basics are things that I've learned personal experience over the years and a lot of articles that I've consumed over time. So currently we'll be talking about some of the best design practice for dark mode UI and how we can get like help get better experiences and have a better cleaner design when it comes to designing on the dark interfaces. So firstly, what is dark mode? So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Oh, my bad shit. From script, but still goes to the point that dark mode actually still. So let me get back to my original script. It's a mistake. Research error. So
Can anyone hear me? I think we lost Ice. He was complaining of the internet um, earlier on. Or is it my? Oh, okay. So let's just give him a couple of minutes, seconds, and then I'm sure he should be back. I was already enjoying the session. Just introduction, and I was already falling in love with the session already. So let me just give him check the message. Okay,
All
he's
right.
back.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know what's wrong. My MTN has been messing up throughout like the last 2 days. Okay. Where did you guys like stop so I could continue from there?
And the research errors you made. That's where.
Oh, very terrible research errors. My fault. My mistake. So let me try and quickly correct myself quickly. All right. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Okay, yes, I can see it now.
All right. So apologies for my bad network. Apologies for my bad research. So on a more serious note, what exactly is dark mode? So dark mode, yeah, actually has been around for longer than we think. In fact, the world's first set of computers basically worked on dark mode. They all had um, inability to properly display colors due to like some refractory index issues. So they by default had to work on a dark theme or on a light theme with heavy on dark usage. So it's a style that was there, but then it wasn't necessarily a style. It was more of, oh, that was the only condition, that was the only like option they had. But now it has kind of improved and metamorphosed into a great and stylish kind of experience that we have now, which is a night friendly color theme that mainly focuses on using dark colors for surface and UI elements, whereby darker colors reflect less light while still providing great reading experiences, all thanks to the high contrast difference between sharp elements, subtle text surfaces, instead of your traditional black and white, instead of a traditional white text, basically, on a black background. So it got me thinking, and there are a lot of issues and a lot of mistakes people make between dark mode and dark theme. So they are basically one in the same, but very little differences, very subtle. So the rise of dark mode has also like driven the high demand for dark theme in web design, which uses the same concept as dark mode display basically. So the two concepts all deal with working on your dark interfaces. Some people tend to call it inverting of your light mode. But basically, what a dark theme does is a dark theme basically displays a black background or a dark background regardless of the light or dark mode in the interface. So your dark mode design is just basically using dark elements or dark background and light elements in your design. While your dark mode or dark theme is kind of a settings that comes with either your Apple iOS or your Android or your Windows. That's just the slight differences. So that switcher is more of the theme, while the mode is the interface display itself. So now, why do people love dark theme so much? Firstly, it's cool. You can't deny the fact that it looks very sweet. Dark backgrounds can give a web design this professional, luxurious, and sometimes mysterious feel, especially when paired with vibrant colors and very eye-catching illustrations. Ooh, it will bust your head very quickly. It catches the eyes very fast. It can complement the brand style Dark theme usually complements, like when you have like very good color usages, dark theme tends to tell a story because of the mysterious feel and the calmness it brings. It just gets to spark your curiosity, and when properly utilized, it can tell a story and it can expand the brand to the context in which the brand designer actually kind of has control over. It helps users focus. Dark backgrounds can serve as a dramatic canvas that draws users' attention to key elements of a design and copy. It helps to reduce eye strain. So it's also unique. Although dark theme is popular in web designs nowadays or app designs nowadays, but a lot of products still work with the traditional and conventional light theme, which when working with a dark theme tends to stand out and give your product a unique feel. That's why we even notice it a lot, because if a lot of products or majority of products were still on dark theme, when you now see a light theme design or a light mode design, that now gets to drag your attention because it stands out. So regardless of the popularity, it's still very unique. Now, as regards one of the benefits of it, this was just a survey that was carried out online. Now, this was a comparison between a white mode or a white UI and a dark UI. And if you get to see, this is the eye tracking test. Now, the eye tracking test for the light mode just gets to give you this very scattered heat waves, because on the light mode, remember, you are working with a lot of one of the basic principles of working with a good design is having good visual hierarchy. And having good visual hierarchy is easy to pull off on a light mode, but it's a bit more difficult, especially when working with a lot of elements. You have to be very intentional about your color usages, your saturation usages, your opacity usages, your sizing, and all this tends to drag attention. That's why you have way more focus on the dark theme, whereby this proves to be the strongest hierarchical point, showing other aspects. Your focus point in general is stronger on the dark mode when properly done. Stronger on the dark mode than the light one. Now, challenges with dark theme design. Yeah, what are the problems? What's the say inside? Text can be harder to read. So dark mode is not really ideal for reading heavy text. And with contradicting to one of the advantages whereby it reduces eye strain, when dark mode is done with a lot of texts, it gets to increase eye strain. Now, this particular page was done deliberately to show you how a clutter of text can actually make a design that is intended to be on a dark theme overwhelming. Now, when you compare it to the subsequent screens, you get to notice um there is heavy strain on your eyes because of the because of the heavy text usages on just a particular interface. So when also another thing, when dark mode is done with heavily saturated colors, um, dark theme designs give off a very accessible feel when working with highly saturated colors, which comes by default to most brands. Because one of the major reasons, like when you even work with brands, when you work on brand design, you get to see people that work with very vibrant colors, very high saturation colors. Reason being that it attracts. When putting it out, let's say I'm working for a food design, I have to bring a very attractive color that when people see it, people tend to fall in love with the brand, even before even using the brand. But there is this wall of dark theme and highly saturated colors gets to have too much focus points everywhere, and that kind of increases a lot of strain. So there has to it's a problem that is faced with dark modes, whereby the brand feel when implemented on the dark team has a lot of issues, and we'll talk about how like kind of work with this. So when do you choose dark mode? Dark mode is very popular at the moment, yeah, but it doesn't mean you have to use it everywhere, which is the honest thing. Too much of everything is bad. So when can you try to use dark mode? One, when it matches with your app emotions or your product emotions, basically. Two, when designing a minimal project. Three, when you want the core content to stand out. When you want to create a healthier experience, and when do you avoid dark theme? When there's a lot of text, when there's a lot of visual elements, too many elements everywhere, tend to avoid it. And when there are a lot of bright colors, please let me know if you can still hear me so that I'll proceed and I will
Yes,
not be talking to my last
yes, I
time.
can hear you now.
All right, so let the soap sharing begin. Tips when designing dark theme. Drum rolls. Da, 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 dam. So basically, number one, and we'll go. There are very simple steps that a good designer ought to know, but these should more emphasis should be placed when actually designing on dark things. Now, firstly, is considering your brand. Dark backgrounds aren't for every brand. So before you invest time, resources into crafting dark theme UI designs, evaluate your brand story, evaluate your brand character, evaluate your color palette. Will the dark background help you tell the story more effectively? Will it help you highlight certain product features? Will it fit the context of your offering? If all these answers as no, then a dark thing might not be for you. Honestly, it's not by force. Bunch of colors everywhere. Dark mode is not by force. Let me go. Secondly, avoid pure black. Avoid use of pure black. That is 00000. Avoid it. So when designing dark theme, it doesn't really require you using pure. In fact, a dark gray can accomplish the same look and feel as a pure black, but soften the contrast between the text and the background, making it easier for users to focus. Dark gray backgrounds also enable you like use a wider range of colors in your design and achieve greater depth through shadows and elevations. So another thing again that you can use, instead of using pure blacks, you can use a particular very dark variant of the primary color, and you can get a very very good saturation point that you can use for your dark theme. And we'll just maybe look at that line when trying to see how we can generate like a feel for your dark mode design. So another point is avoid heavily saturated colors. So basically, what is saturation? Saturation refers to the intensity of colors. The more saturated the color is, the purer it will appear. The less saturated the color is, the more gray it will appear. Saturated colors look very, very good on light backgrounds. Very good, very eye-catching. Brilliant royal blue on white background. Ooh, so nice. Or having this royal purple. Very nice. Even red looks very nice on a white background. But when you put them on a black background, it gets a bit difficult to use, especially when the saturation is very, very high, making it causing a whole lot of eye strain for the users and reducing the experience you're trying to create in the first place. Next is match your colors to your message. So colors evoke different emotions depending on the background. So for example, a bright pink on a light background might feel light and playful. But that same pink on the dark background will feel very edgy and mysterious. So make sure your color palette sends the right message to your audience. So colors have different perceptions when it comes to your backgrounds. So that means that a dark theme can't communicate the same as a light theme for every time, for every color usage. So most times, light and dark themes usually evoke different emotions. So instead of trying to like fix that, most times you get to, and what I personally do is have a more expanded color palette. Even if you want to actually work with your dark theme, have a more expanded color palette that now it puts in more work, but you'll be able to match the emotions being invoked and the background, whether being a dark theme or the light theme. So it puts in more work, but you have to let your colors match your message. So now this is just a screenshot of an interface I saw online, and now basically shows two scenarios. Now, the right one is the light mode. If you look at the color usages, it has this vibrant, saturated feel of the colors. Corrections, you get to see this subtle use and play of colors. But when this switches over to the dark theme, That same income withdrawal could not be maintained, because if it was, it would be saturated for the background. And once that is too saturated, still having the same good contrast difference between the green circle and the green icon being represented here would have too much eye strain. Now, that would end up impeding the experience you're trying to create. So hence, this was just a very good designer trying to like work with both palettes and trying to like maximize the experience. So just some little touches here and there that helps like fix such problems. Now, remember I talked about heavy on saturation colors. So if you look at this color now, this red on a dark background, the saturation is a bit too much for the dark background. Still, it makes that contrast difference a bit smaller and gives this level of eye strain. But there's just this little trick. Now, one of them is just create an overlay. Now, this overlay created was just to create a less saturated version of that color that can be used very, very, very adequately on the dark background. So this was an overlay of 40%. And if you look at this color here was the eyedropper was just basically picked from the overlay between this, and you got a very, very less saturated color for you that can be used on your dark theme. So just some little tips and tricks there and there. So this is another variant. Now, your primary color normally for this particular color system is the 700. Now, if you take this 700 and use on a light background, it would have been very, very perfect. It contrasts well with the background. The call to action tends to pop out more, and you know, okay, what's the primary purpose of a CTA is to drag the user's attention. That would have been perfect. But switching over to a dark theme, it kills the interface. The saturation becomes duller, the view becomes duller, and it makes it very, very difficult for users to actually go through your interface properly. But just a little fix, just like we did here, by trying to create a less saturated version. This is, I usually advise when you work in the color palette, just tend to like have a lot of saturation points, because it gets to like give you various points to pick out for your interface. So the saturation point was reduced drastically, and you get to see the next screen, and you get to see that same primary color being used but a less saturated version, and this can properly fit in to the interface. So now you can see your buttons clearly. They still stand out and they blend properly, communicating the same message that your dark theme, that your brand actually meant to communicate on the light theme, but now being transferred to the dark theme. So you didn't just switch, but there are little tricks that you have to like put in place. So the next thing is make sure there is enough contrast in your colors. So contrast is the key in dark mode design, because your background needs to be dark enough that the white text is easy to read. Contrast is defined as the ratio of one color to another. Not enough contrast would not enough contrast and your design will appear dark and muddled. Too much contrast and your lighter elements will appear to glow and deliver a very, very jarring visual experience. Avoid plain white text. Plain white text makes our eyes need to absorb more light. Now, when this happens, fonts can begin to bleed. If you see very plain white text on the background, look at it very well. You get to see like it gets to like look like it has this blur that is coming out of it. Your eyes are a bit straining, or a bit like you are straining your eyes, and basically part of the text tend to like bleed into the background if you really, really look properly, and allows it blur, especially when you have like the FFFFFFF direct on a very dark background or your pure black. That's like the worst. So most times, what I do is I work with a slightly darker shade of white. Now, this slightly darker shade of white, for now, just like you have for your hierarchy in text, you have your H1, you have your body tag, you have your caption. You have the same hierarchy when it comes to text colors. So whatever your background is, I make sure I use a high emphasis of, for my main text, it's 7% of my pure FFF. For my subtext or maybe normal text, 60%. then maybe disable text 38%. These standard values I learned over time, Google's material design, and has actually been very helpful. So this is just a quick example. Now, if you look at this still looks like white. This still stands out, contrasts very well. But look at this. This first white, it's kind of off-white. It still stands out as your header. The second works with the 60%, works very well with your title. Now, I try not to use opacity switches. It feels very uncomfortable. So when generating my color system, like this now, what I just, I can have two variants of this. I reduce this text here from 100% to, let's say, 87% or 80%. I usually work between 85 to 90 sharp. So this 90%, for example, I think this was 90% I used here. I'll create a duplicate. Now I'll use the color picker, the eyedrop, and pick this. So remember, this was FFF 85% or 90%. This maybe might give me an ED because it respected the background color and it respected the opacity drop. So I try not to use percentage values because during implementation it gets a bit tricky to do. I really did not like it when I was implementing then. So most of my devs don't really like it. So I tend to like generate these color shades before even designing at all. So I get to like have all this done. Now, this card here on the right was actually generated from this card. Now, when working with backgrounds as well, you don't just like, I'll show you how like I generate some backgrounds when it comes to elevations, when it comes to that theme. But this card here, all I just did was create a white box on this same background, like your overlay, and use this as your color drop and snip this out. So this would have the opacity. If you look at this, you tend to see the gradient is actually blurring into the card. Can be a very good form of design if you are trying to achieve that design feel. Especially like nowadays, the Web3 design fields actually work with a lot of gradienty feeling. But when working with elevations and you're trying to generate your color style, just have a neutral color that's without anything. So this was generated from this. Now, the text on this is just going to show you that in as much as we are working with a dark mode, bad saturation or bad contrast, makes it very, very difficult for users to see. So I've told you how I generated the colors, but this is like was done to be like a whole lot grayer. Now this is more legible. This still stands out as a header. This still is subtle enough in hierarchy to be the body. But this, with so much emphasis on the greenness, makes the contrast difference really poor and makes it very difficult to read. You can still read this because you feel your eyes are good. But remember, we're working with inclusive design. And one of the major rules of inclusivity is designing what everyone can use, or as much people as possible. And I try to work with inclusive design as much as possible. And there are these color ratio standards that you have to keep in. I used to remember the numbers then, but I just felt it was, no, I ended up realizing it was pointless to like store those numbers. So what I just do, I have plugins. I can always just check the contrast ratio and it works. And I'll show you how to do that in a bit. Next is communicate depth. Now, create a clear context hierarchy in your website design. On a light background, this is often not achieved with shadows. So what they basically do is when you have a light background and you have a card, you tend to, most times there are two ways people, and you separate that card or you add an elevation, and it tends to make the card look separate from the background. Now, the greater the elevation, the more closer to you. So hence that feel of depth is established through good shadow usages. But on dark mode, it's tricky because you can't really work with shadows because first of all, your shadows are black. It's a black background. Now, I remember there when I like started designing and I was like,
are black and stand out more, why not just invert it? See, it's not simple inversion. Just convert it from black shadows to white shadows. And your designs, I see a lot of juniors doing it, a lot of beginners doing it, to post on Twitter. I see it's nice. It's a very smart move.
But your designs look very terrible. It kills the classiness, it kills the simplicity of dark theme design. So most times avoid shadows on dark mode and work with a lot of depths. Now there are still ways to play around with shadows. Like there are sometimes you can use color shadows to try and give this playful kind of feel. Like I can put a card now and play with maybe some blue shadows around it, or play with some purple shadows. It's just to draw attention, like okay, it's like a glow is coming out. It happens a lot. Web3 design is very tricky, deals a lot with dragging users' attention, but still, the core of it is communicate depth through good color contrast usage and not shadows when working with that. Now, this was a color scale that I kind of generated, and I can easily do this in like 1 minute with you guys here. So if you look at this, just like I explained in the former slides, each column was generated from the left card with some certain levels of opacity. Now, when working with like a shades, I usually work with like 3 levels of the shades. I work with the dark variants, the normal, and the light. So now the first I did was have this at an opacity of 95%. This first card, snipped it, the color dropped. I have my first card. The next one, reduce the opacity with a white card to 80 to let's say 90, not 80. I usually work with 555s. Then when I get to the next level, that's dark, normal, light, I jump from a 5-step to a 10-step system. Then I jump again to a 15-step system till I get to 0. So this colored snipped it at 90, snipped it at 95, at 85, snipped it. Then no, I said from 90, 85, 80, then jump to 70, snipped it, 60, snipped it, 50, snipped it, then I'll jump to 45. Then no, I'll leave that 40 and just keep on jumping. Sometimes you play with it depending on the background color you have and like your primary color, you just get to play with it. Because remember, the goal is to try and create level of elevations where we're trying to create in design system, we call it your grayscales. So this is one of the ways like you get to do it from your background. Now, more white space, less content. Too much text or content creates cluttered UIs. Makes it very hard for users to scan through and read so quickly. When designing dark themes, remember to add as little content as possible. Keep the users focused. And if you do not need a lot of content, introduce your product or service, try to add more white space or black space in dark mode if you are working with that. Create more readable layouts. Avoid using a lot of paragraphs. Keep your page as neat and as tidy as possible. Then use a lot of brightly saturated imagery. So last but not the least, when working with dark themes, tend to avoid desaturated images, working with a lot of overlays over the images, as they tend to reduce the contrast, which gives the image such beauty in dark scenes and reduces the impact of the design. Try to work more with text beneath images or cards, not necessarily overlaid when you're working with that design. Personal preference, it tends to reduce that beauty of the UI. And this is an example. So if you look at this, this is a card. Now this text, yeah, it stands out, it's clear, you can see it, but this has reduced the beauty of this image compared to just this, working with a more simplistic, minimal kind of interface. Dark mode really emphasizes on the user, or the beauty of dark mode comes with minimal designs, comes with very good use of negative spacing and very good use of hierarchy. So just those two designs, one is still giving you the same context, which would have worked on light mode, but having it represented in dark mode reduces that image quality and kills your in general and overall view of the design. So that brings me to the end. So thank you very much. You guys have seen my slides and I've basically said everything that I came prepared to tell you. So does anyone have questions? And I'll be glad to entertain your questions.
Thank you so much. It was really enlightening. I learned a lot. I'm sure go back to watch this video over and over again. Everyone, please, if you have questions, you could put them up in the section, and then let's bombard Aise with our questions.
All right. So while, like, before you do that, while the questions are still coming, if they are, I just wanted, like, just since we're talking about showing you how, like, I created some frames, some colors, I usually just work with 140 900. So let's say this is our typical hero section. Let's just create a column. Let's say we have this as our primary column, and what do I want to work with? I want to work with something blue, dragon. Nah, saturated too much. I don't like it. Oh, this is nice. So let's say I have this as a primary color, for example. This on a white mode is actually fine. It works well. Because of the high saturation, I can actually work with the light text. I don't know, personal preference. I would like working with CTAs with light text. I'm not really a fan of putting black on the CTA, so I try to, like, work with colors that allow me have that saturation point. But still, that contrast level. But still, that's not, like, the focus of what we're trying to do here. So if I want to work with this now, for example, I want to create a dark background instead of just using black. I might just end up coming here. I create another variant of this. Drag this. I give this an overlay, the standard black. Reduce the overlay to, let's say, 95. Oh no, 95 is too much. So let's say 90. This works for me. I just come snip this, and I've got in my dark background. It's different from this. This is
Sorry, could you do that again?
okay. Basically, what I just did was, this is my primary column. This is my primary column. All I just did was create an overlay for this, like you do your modals. Make this black. Now, once I've made this black, little small tricks. Reduce the opacity, like you want to create an overlay. Most times overlays I work with like 17, but this is just for my background. So now I'm trying to get this background. All I just did was, let's make this white back. All I just did was create this, come into that intersection point. Remember, see, this is having a feel of the primary color. It's not purely black, but it's dark enough to be my base background. And I click on this and I snip this, and I've gotten it. No matter what I type, hello Josh. Let's make this car star. Maybe let's open 96. This sits down well. Then now for the text, instead of having this as my full white, I just get to reduce this a bit, just slight reduction. I come to this, I take the eyedropper, I snip it. Now my base white color automatically is this E6. Remember, I've not started generating my color palette. I'm just getting my background shells, my base. I work with, let's say, I work with 24 here. I change this to, let's say, matter as a serif font. I want this. So most times now, this, remember, 90, I can work with, let's say, 16. All I just do is snip this here, and I've gotten my normal, and I've gotten my normal text, I've gotten my sub. The hierarchy is perfect, the subtext is perfect, the colors work very well. I can play with this if I want. Remember, if you look at this, they're having some hints of the primary color. They're not fully gray. So the background here, still having hints. Now, if I want to expand this color palette and keep going, let's say for whatsoever reason, I want to create my color sheet. Now, this is some mistakes, and people will end up missing this. This started off as a 90 overlay. I can tilt this now to, let's say, 85. I snip this. I'm creating my depth now. I drag, I duplicate, drag and drop. I can change this to 80. And let's say I create the last layer. Make this 75. Yeah, I'm creating my scheme. If I do this, let's say now I want to jump a step of tens and I make this 65 and I pick this. The moment I pick this, if you notice, this Chrome is actually still working perfectly and it's actually very sweet in the eyes. I have this, I drop this, let's see, I go with that for that 55. Snip this. Oh, that's fine. We're getting closer. If I continue with this, with this scale, I would end up getting to a point where I'm back to the primary color. But that's not really what I want. This can work for a dark shade of my primary color, but I'm trying to create my elevations. I'm not trying to create a dark shade of my primary color. So this is good for the background, but not necessarily good for the remaining elements. That's why I said work with the higher the saturation of colors, it tends to reduce it. So let's copy this, and saturation just basically means higher grayscale in your colors. So let's say I delete this. So this from here already, I might not necessarily work with something desaturated. I can come, I'm very used to hex, so I can come and reduce this. Saturation has reduced, but I maintain that level of depth. And see, I've already gotten a color shade that can work perfectly well as my background. It's not shouty, it blends well. It still has hints of the primary color. Or I can work with HSL. Some people like working with HSL. It's better, but I have bad habits. Hue, saturation, brightness. I can just reduce this to, let's say, 14. And see, I've got a more saturated value. I get this from here that still had that opacity overlay trick. I get it from here. Or the other tools you can use. There's one I like using a lot, and that's what's the name? That's foundation design. I've not used it in a while, so it's not here. I think it should still be here. Yeah, foundation color generator. I've not started up a new project. The last time I built a design system was like months ago, and I've been using it since then. So, but when I want to like create this scheme, what I just do is I really like this one. The other plugins, but I like this one a lot. All I just do is generate this from here. Put this, and I've generated.
Create this palette.
And
I've generated my.
Now
This gives me my light versions, my normal versions. This is
my primary color and my darker shades. Remember, we can even get our darker shades from that trick. So if I
instead of just with the black overlay,
and I do black and white overlay, I can generate this by myself, but why stress myself that much? Now that is for my black shade. Now if I want to get, let's say, my grayscale from here, instead of doing that, this can give me a grayscale, but this is too close. I don't like it. It's very, very close. So what I do is I can generate this palette. Let's see, I generate this palette. I go to dark, colors has changed, don't mind it. I generate on that palette. I go to surface. I generate on that palette. Once I've done this, I can start picking my normal versions from here. Pick my light versions, pick my normal versions, pick my dark versions, and find a way to blend it. This one, there has to be like some little manual work in it. But if you try it, you'll see you've gotten your grayscales from that your background, and these are not saturated, so they do not have that contrast issue. And at the same time, you've gotten your shades and your scale for your primary colors. Makes things like a whole lot easier. So basically, when we are working with, let's say, a dark, when I'm working with this works on a dark mode. By default, I'm already very used to creating colors that have that balance. But let's say if this doesn't have the balance, for example, this is this. This works perfectly on a light mode. It works. In fact, it works very well with your CTA, but on a dark mode, it doesn't. So what I just do is I duplicate this, create a white overlay instead, reduce this, let's say, to like 40 or maybe 20. Create another one, snip this, from here, and I've gotten a shade from my primary that was overly saturated but desaturated, still maintaining the primary kind of film. And I've gotten a shade that can work when I switch over to my dark mode. I maintain it. So you must not use the same color on your light mode or your dark mode. You can always work the less saturated version of it. And yeah, the tool for checking contrast, I basically use contrast checker. That one is something currently in my recent plugins because I use it a lot. Just click on this. You get the contrast ratio. That's why I don't even cram the numbers again. It's pointless. You can get to keep adjusting. You have gotten to the point where it starts feeling. Why? Because the contrast is not good enough. So on the normal text is to feel, but on the large text, you can decide to be stylish. It still works, but it's not very good. So let's say if I want to even work the large text, I can put it around here and it works. So before time goes, let me quickly look at our questions before I get carried away. So does anyone have any question? And
Yes.
if I begin.
Okay. Paul says, Paul's question came in while we were working.
Okay.
Covered it during. So he says, on what percentage background do you start with when creating your color system? You mentioned that while you were playing around with
Yeah.
the tips and tricks.
Now, this is personal preference. I usually start with 19 because 95 has over time shown to be too close to the background. And for my first elevation, I want a certain level of depth and a certain level of contrast difference. So 90 works for me.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's about the only question we had. Although Ade Tayo was commenting saying that people that use X with saturation selections are cultists.
So bad habit really is very bad habit. There is I started off designing with hex codes. So I'm very used to hex code. Or let's say I started off implementing designs with hex code during front-end days. So HSLs are just weird. You start checking percentage value, it's just tricky. So I was already used to hex code. When I started designing, hex codes came in very natural to me. So it's the same way I still kind of nowadays still one kind work more without auto layouts than using auto layouts. I can design a full product, you'll not see one auto layout, and there will be no spacing issues, not even one. It's just bad habits. Sometimes because there's a new technology doesn't mean I should learn it.
That's not bad habit. That's God mode.
I'm very, very attentive to details. So it's an extra work, but if you learn how to use it. It's good to save you time, but it don't enter my body too much.
That's really awesome. And thanks so much for the session. I would still give in a couple of seconds as a question for you. Okay, there's a message coming in. Let me see.
Okay, Joel is asking for rush over elevations. How could they do this one now? Okay, so elevations are tricky. Let me share my screen. The window design. Yeah, I made this design presentation when I was doing design with you that time. My default board. All right, so when I say elevations, so remember, if this is a light mode, for example, if I want to create depth between this and the background, two things: either I use a stroke. Now, let's say I pick this primary color. I don't like this, so I drag it, find a balance that works for me. Not too bright, not too dark. Yes, it works for me. Now, this can be separated from the design. Now, it depends on the kind of design direction I'm going with. If I'm going with this retro kind of design, I can make this a whole lot darker. Let me just save this instead. I can make this a whole lot darker. But most times, I usually like working with very subtle kind of designs. Let it be clean and sexy. So this works. Or I do with shadows. Now, if I'm working with shadows, remove this, put an effect. I take more time playing with shadows. So let's say I just pick this, find a darker shade variant. I like it a bit saturated. I work with some level of depth. I work with maybe a spread of like 18, maybe my Y value of minus 19. My Y value of minus 5. spread my blow. I can make it 15. Then I can reduce the percentage value to like 5. So this gives me like, this is usually like my highest elevation. I don't think there's an elevation higher than this. Then I can start toning it down. I can make this a spread of like 15, maybe 40. And basically I'm creating depth. I can increase the blow. Let it spread out a bit. It's very subtle. But this will not necessarily work on a dark mode. Remember, see, I cannot even see the blow at all safe. Now, if I drop this, let's say I carry this background color, it doesn't work. I'm not even seeing the elevation. Let's say I try to be smart and I change this to white. Some people might feel it works, but it gives this new morph kind of feel, which is very, very weird. I've never been a fan of new morph. So it makes the design look very dirty. So what we do is you work with elevations. Now, the elevations can be generated from your primary color. Now, I'll try and easily generate it. So remember I said I like working with 90. You can use your black. Black is fine. Or you can use a shade of this, which is still fine. But remember, you don't have any shade of your color. So you work with black as your base, 90. So I drag this first of all as my first elevation and I pick my color from here. Now, sorry, not black, white. What am I doing? White, and I start with maybe like people already my head's already paining me. White, then why am I forgetting this thing as much as possible now? So basically, this is my primary color. Old age is not good. So I work with this. Let's pick this. Don't mind me. I just pick this color from here. Then let's say you just find a way to snip it. Let's try maybe 80. Then you bring this from here. And you just keep going like that. Yes. See, it's old age. And this is what I did first on. Then I just keep on reducing from there. So let's say I reduce to like 70. I create another one. But if I continue with this scale, for example, so yeah, I've reduced it again. I can reduce this now again to like maybe 60, and I catch another column. But the problem is, if I continue doing this, I would end up having, yes, an elevation, but highly saturated elevation, we might not necessarily work. So the trick to doing it is reducing your saturation values. I'm not really a big fan of working with HSL, but if you're working with HSL, it just means you're reducing this here. You can reduce this to like 40. Or if you're working in hex codes, I just tend to like manipulate it by myself here. Manipulate it on that same scale range. So this again, I just get to like manipulate it a bit on that scale range. And like that, just start building your elevations properly. Now, this still gives you that sense of the primary color, but at the same time, less and less noisy compared to this that was generated from here. I can also still reduce the saturations. Oh, I'm not very comfortable with this. I still want it to be more saturated. No problem. But remember, when you're reducing the saturation of one, ensure that all of them have a very consistent saturation base, or it's going to be weird. So that's basically fine. I know I rushed it, but there's no time again. Hope I'm safe,
Yeah.
Josh.
Yes. Thanks, Aise. So really an insightful. And then I said that the session is being recorded. We'll put it up on YouTube and then share the link on our Twitter page so everyone can check, watch, and then learn from it all over again.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. I haven't watched it again self and collect more soap.
Thank you so much. Aise. Thank you for the session. So it's great having you. Thank you.
Anytime. The pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Hope
and
we do this.
Thanks everyone for joining in. Hope to do this with Aise some other time. Yeah, definitely we'll do this some other time.